Roy Pasola. Welcome to Workflow Wednesday. And today I've got Tom Urban with me, and we're going to talk about how to turn your CMDB into an ATM. Compelling topic, right? Hi, Tom.
Hi, Troy. How are you?
Doing well. Enjoying
Thanks for
another
having
Wednesday.
me.
Indeed, it's been fun preparing for this. We've been talking about a number of different things as aligned financials and third era work together. But as we've been working on this and looking at so many different ways we can instrument CMDB for financial analysis, I'm excited about this session today. So thanks for joining me live.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. One of the things that we talked about, like I said, is how do we really do the financial analysis so we can see hard ROI. That was our title that we worked on. But the message that came out of it is turn your CMDB into an ATM. Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by instrumenting CMDB for financials.
Well, a lot of times when people look at a CMDB, they look at it, there's three lenses to look through, and they look through two of them, and it's like a two-legged stool, right? So they look at it from the functional perspective. What is this asset going to do for me? And the physical perspective. Where is it? What is it attached to, et cetera?
Right.
But there's also that financial perspective. And that's where you say, what did this thing cost me? Not what's the most current cost for this thing, but what did this actual item cost me? What's my ongoing maintenance? What's it costing me to support it? What's my mean time between failure, and what's my replacement cost, and all those dynamics that are within it. The other piece that's within there is this life cycle. So it's not a static item, right? It has you call it cradle to grave or request to retirement. Sure. A lot of times companies will have pieces and parts of that life cycle, but with a platform like ServiceNow, you can have the entire life cycle from the time somebody said, hey, I want this, to the time that the company said, this thing's no longer useful. So it's really good to have those. And oftentimes with companies, they're like, because they have these fragmented systems, trying to make those actionable, they're going out there and they're trying to cobble it all together. And the information's, it's disjointed, it's out of date, and it makes it really difficult to take action on it.
Right, it does. And maybe you want to pop up that slide, the one that we were talking about before. It's like we've seen this, that, oh, I need a new server or I need a laptop. There's a way to do that. We see that in ServiceNow.
Right.
And then you've got this other side. It is so disconnected, isn't it?
Well, and these are just two pieces, right? So in a typical ServiceNow environment, this is what we'll see. I need something and it gets approved or it doesn't get approved. And then it gets thrown over to procurement. And, I feel bad for the guys in procurement, because oftentimes, sometimes somebody knew they needed this like a month ago, and they're like, hey, you've got the request, I need it tomorrow. And they're like, why am I just hearing about this now, right? So procurement's always in this catch-up mode, and they're swivel chairing. They go to finance, do these guys have money for it? Eventually, they'll place an order for it. And our view of the world, the financial view of the world, that purchase order, that's the birth certificate for an asset. It's not when you discover it. Discovering, which takes place in other parts of IT. Let's go see what we have. It's not what we own. It's what we have.
It's what we have that's plugged in and on. It's even beyond what we have, because sometimes it sits on the shelf, right? It's in our storerooms and other ways, right?
Or somebody's not on the internet or not on a network, right? And so it's managing those two things and tying those together. So here's things we can discover. Well, when did we buy it? What purchase order did we buy it on? Here's things we discover that we don't have a purchase order for. What happened there? Was that like shadow IT, or do we not want this thing on the network? Right. And then here are the things that have the full life cycle. We approve this request, it was bought, it's on the network, it has this much time, et cetera.
Right.
And so all that information, and because we financially enable all that information, we start to pick up nickels and dimes all over the place as we find that. And so let me show you the next slide. And this is what a connected asset lifecycle looks like. And sometimes people will look at this, and depending on who we're talking to, they'll see it as an eye chart. Like a lot of ServiceNow people would be like, how many workflows do you have going here? but and it looks complicated to them. But when we talk to a procurement person, they go, wow, you've really simplified what happens.
Yeah, right.
In their
It's
world,
that
this is
view
a
of
simple.
it's that view we commonly see where it's like, no, we've got a simple environment, and then as you start drawing it out, you see this massive spaghetti of all these intertwined things.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's what you found is you found a way to kind of diagram it where there is some complexity, but as you start looking at it, it's really a pretty greatly, I would say, simplified flow that ties all that stuff in.
Well, we're not introducing anything to anybody here, right? They have this environment today. We've just put it into a diagram and shown them where the pieces and parts connect. And this is your workflow, and it's a workflow of workflows.
Right.
And so as people look at this, like when I buy something and I have that birth certificate, well, let's capture that in the CFDP. And why do we want to know that? We start to figure out, when are we buying stuff? When are things getting consumed? When does our subscription start or our maintenance start? When does it end? And we find all these knobs that we can start to tweak. The touchless workflow was something that somebody had. This was a company that was expanding greatly. And what they were trying to do was encourage people to get standard items. And it was the Wild West. Anybody could order anything. And it didn't matter if you ordered something that was pre-authorized or not authorized, it still went through the same process. Well, what they said was, if this is an item that IT has already approved that they'll support, and management has already approved on it, let's put it through this touchless workflow. And so how do you encourage users to do that? Well, when they order something, you say, look, you ordered this item. Here's a different item that's almost the same that I have in stock that you can have tomorrow. Right. Or if you really, really want that item, like, you don't turn people down, right? You just give them options that steer them, right? If you still want that item, it's got to go through these two levels of approval. It's got to go through your management level. It's got to go through IT management level. Then I got to order it. Then I've got to bring it in. And oh, by the way, I'm not expediting or bringing it overnight. You can have it in 10 weeks.
Right.
So if you really, really want it, you can get it. You just have to wait 2.5 months. Or this thing's pretty close and you can have it tomorrow. So, it helps. Everybody kind of benefits when you put options in front of people that steer them down roads you want them to go down, because, it's about spares, and, if they drop in, you have to replace it and all those things.
Right.
The fewer items you have to track, the easier everybody's life gets.
And if you kind of pick at that scenario a little bit, I think all of us have heard or experienced, well, I requested something and they say it's going to take me 3 months to get it.
Right.
Because you don't have that offer back where it's like, I'm glad you asked for this. We can do that. It's going to take 3 months, but we found this similar thing that, shipped to you in the next 6 hours, right? It's
right.
That
or even
information
better,
is often lacking.
You can work with a lot of vendors that will say, look, you can actually have this stuff ready and available. Give us visibility into what you're going to buy. And then when you need it, boom, we can expedite it to you, but we know what's coming. And so, a lot of companies will buy, companies hire more people in Q1 than Q4 on average, right? And if you're just ordering things like based on what you ordered last month, well, you're not going to have enough things in January, and you're going to have too much stuff in like November, December.
Sure.
And so by using this and having this visibility, we can say, look, we're not going to figure out what to buy. ServiceNow is going to tell us based on quarter over quarter, year over year, employee headcount. We can take all those metrics and say, this is really what you should have in stock, because we're trying to bring all those numbers down. We're trying to get everything to just in time. And there's another piece in here, available budget. I can't tell you the number of companies that somebody puts in a request and they start screaming at procurement, and procurement just says, okay, I'll order it for you. And then you find out the guy didn't have any money.
Right.
And then how do you walk that backwards? Think of all the work that creates for people. And it's like, look, happy to order for it, but you don't have any money. Either cancel your request or go get money. It just makes people's lives easier when you have that kind of visibility. The three-way match is an interesting one, because it's where you say, did I order this? Did I receive it? And does the invoice match it? And you think, okay, well, I'm going to
logically
pay it.
It makes sense, right?
Right, that you should do that on every order. But oftentimes people will get an invoice and they're like, well, it looks like something we would order, let's pay it. And we actually had one customer, this is one invoice, one item that they never received. And the vendor couldn't prove they actually delivered it. There was no proof of delivery, there was no proof of receipt.
Okay.
It was $176,000. Paid for everything, right? We became, and that's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Like, it's not like they did that once and that was it. That paid for the project, but then every other time that happened, that was just cash in the bank. So you talked about turning the CMDB into an ATM. That's cash right there.
Right. Keeping that consistent each time.
Right. And then as we get to the end, another thing, people will just send you an invoice for maintenance. Hey, you bought all these things for us. We see all these things registered. Here's the maintenance. Well, if you're doing ham salmon, you look in there, you're like, wait a minute, a quarter of these things were retired. Right. We don't even use those anymore. So just being able to bounce the CMDB against the invoice for the maintenance, again, more cash just rolls back into the company.
Right. So you're really scaling maintenance to what's live and in use.
Right.
Dynamically.
Exactly. So you're probably wondering, okay, there's a few things there. Show me some numbers. At least this is the part I like to do. So these are some of the more popular ones. There's a lot more soft dollar savings in other areas that I hinted at the last one. But these are the ones that really, I think, people rally behind. And when they take it to get approval for a project like that, these are the ones that people, you put it on a piece of paper and they see it and they're like, oh yeah, we do have pain around that. And like I said, like the three-way match, you get one of those, it pays for the project. Maintenance, you get one of those, it pays for the project. But there's all these areas that people have. And so this is really looking at it, get away from the workflows and, inventory and everything else. What are we trying to do? Where can we actually put down goals? And that's what you see on here is, we'll help people put down targets. What do you think you can save? So it's not us giving them a number, it's them giving us a number. And sometimes people will just say, well, I just want to pay for the project with one of these things. So let's put that down.
Sure.
Fine. It doesn't matter what the number is.
Yep.
Because year one, you're going to get it wrong. Any number works because it's going to be wrong in year one. Once you're smarter about it, then you can say, okay, this is what we did last year. Let's do it again. And, a lot of times when people look at ServiceNow for ham sam, they're looking for that year one ROI. Look at all these licenses that people weren't even using and it paid for it. Well, you claw that back, but in year two, you may be able to claw back some, but you're not going to get that big hit like you got in year one.
Yep.
These are hits that keep coming, right? Because maintenance, that bill would just keep coming year after year after year. Three-way match, those invoices come year after year after year. And as you scale up, it's more important to have visibility. And trying to throw bodies at this or spreadsheets at this, you're not going to have that same confidence as I got the whole life cycle right here in front of me. I know what's going on.
Right. I think this is the part that I've enjoyed so much as we've talked and as we've looked at how our companies work together, that it really is creating that ongoing look that we can be continually looking at how to optimize the spend and optimize the savings, because it should keep giving back. One of the things that we were talking about a little bit before we started is, what pieces should an organization have in place to really start seeing some of these levers?
Well, so let's go back to this one, because that's a great question. And sometimes people will say, well, talk to me about the color coding, and kind of see the legend there on the right side. So, ideally you'll have service catalog. Like, we're not saying don't start here. This is a great place to start.
Right.
Get your service catalog in place, get your ham sam in place, get your discovery in place, but think about the bigger picture. As you're building out the CMDB, financially enable it. I can't tell you the number of times people will say, we're going to bring you in 9 months after we finish the CMDB project. And we're like, as part of that project, are you going to financially enable it? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, my guess is, remember at the beginning, you're going to physically enable it and you're going to functionally enable it. Are you going to financially enable it?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't know. Why would I do that? Well, if this is all you're ever going to do, you don't need to. But
Right. Is
as you
building
start to
this.
think about this, right, that purchase order, like one of the ServiceNow can do procurement, right, purchasing. But a lot of times bigger companies will already have a procurement system.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of ServiceNow is it plays nice. Like if you have something you like, let's just share information. If you have something you don't like, ServiceNow can say, well, we can probably make it better, or we can replace it. And so that's why we have those pieces. But as we put a purchase rec over to you, give it back to us so we can put it in the CMDB. We know when it was purchased. We know when it was received. We know when it went into service. Well, what does that tell us? Wow, if there's 2 months there, that means we lost 2 months of of subscription on that thing or of maintenance on that thing. So can we tighten that up? Are there different areas where we can start to look at those things? So I didn't answer your question yet. So service catalog on the front end, I think is a good way to go.
Yep.
HamSam on the back end is a good way to go. HamSam and financially enable HamSam as you do it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, and this is a little bit selfish on our part, we try to encourage people to do is take projects, programs, portfolios, and start to do your IT budgeting and ServiceNow around those things. Because now what I can do is I can say, okay, I have this budget. I've committed these funds. This person made this request. Do they have money?
Right.
And a
You're tying
dangerous
it
thing
back
is some
to
people,
those budgets. Mm-hmm.
yes. Well, a dangerous thing some people do is, let's say I have $100 million budget, just for a round number. I have 75K in purchase orders, and I've paid for, or I'm sorry, 75 million in purchase orders, 40 million in that I've actually paid out against my budget. A lot of people say, well, my budget was 100 million. I've spent 40 million. I have 60 million left. It's like, no, you've committed 75 in that 100. You only have 25 left.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's all these little pieces that it's the gotchas, and that's where people end up going over their budget. They're like, remember the old story? Well, how can I be out of money? I still have checks left in my checkbook. It's kind of like that. It's like no, just because you have the check doesn't mean you can write it.
Right. Because the PO has already gone out. It just hasn't circled back. Right.
Correct. So budgeting would be an ITBM. Right. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about HamSam. You got your CMDB. You probably have Discovery. ITBM is going to help you with the budgeting. ITSM or PSM is going to help you in that procurement process. So depending on which way
go around it, right? The request and the flow. Yep.
Exactly. And that's also going to help you on the back end because you're creating tasks to say, I sent this back to the vendor. Where is it? But a lot of times the financial kind of weaves in and out of different applications on the platform, depending on what you're wanting to do. And just so you know that the pinkish parts, those are outside of ServiceNow. So that's just us playing nice with other pieces because, you'll hear we have a procurement solution, don't get in our kitchen, or we have a budgeting solution, don't get in our kitchen. We're not doing enterprise budgeting in ServiceNow. We're doing IT budgeting. And the difference there is, a enterprise budget or a finance budget is a CapEx, OpEx thing. An IT budget is a services, projects, and demands thing. And by doing that in ServiceNow, that's a whole different conversation. We could do a Workflow Wednesday on that.
Yeah.
So this makes money here.
About that, right?
Just about anything we touch makes money. So if we want to pivot over to that one, that's a whole new thing that it's really interesting how you can be smarter with your budget and adapt to things like a pandemic that gets dropped on you, right? How do you adjust to work from home initiatives, keeping on-prem people safe without any incremental budget? How do you do that smoothly and efficiently? Well, you do it in ServiceNow.
Right. With ServiceNow. And then like we were talking before, looking at how you do some of that scenario planning and finding a way to do that. And some of that's still art of the possible for us, but we're looking at ways to really help our clients be able to have not only asset, but particularly when you get into that strategic portfolio management and application portfolio management, how do you do some scenario planning and looking at the budgeting to tie it into this whole tree, the full asset life cycle. So it's not just asset, but it's like we were talking about before, it's that strategic portfolios. That is a whole nother discussion. But let's take the remaining time we have, Tom, and just kind of talk about what's it look like to engage with Third Era and Aligned Financials. What's the next step for a company that's like, man, my CMDB is, I've got one. It doesn't feel like an ATM to me.
I think the best thing to do is, and we'll do this a lot of times, let's have a conversation. What are your biggest pain points? When we go to this, what's your biggest pain point? Do you have too much inventory? Do you have too little inventory? Are too many people screaming? Is there this, are we trying to bring the temperature down? But where are you trying to go with it, and what's the best way to get there? Because we don't encourage anybody to boil the ocean. Take this a step at a time. And the cool thing is, we'll take down a chunk of that and we'll find the ROI, and it pays for everything else.
Right.
People are blown away. And we've actually built out ROI calculators. So, ServiceNow has a business value assessment, and that really focuses on those other legs of the stool. But we built these ROI calculators because we're looking at hard dollars. You can't have hard dollar ROI unless you have hard dollar, visibility.
Right.
And so that helps people see, okay, this is where those are going to come in. And so we get that hard dollar, we put down a metric. If we meet that metric, can we keep going? Why would you not keep going? If, Troy, every time you talk to me, I gave you $20, why wouldn't you want to keep talking to me?
Yeah, I'd have you on speed dial.
Right.
Let me ask you something about hard ROI, because I know you brought this up multiple times, but many of us in this industry have worked on creating ROI calculators, and the common thing is we have customers telling us, or the people that we deliver it for, whether it's an internal team, one of the things that I hear over and over is, I've worked on this ROI calculator, but the people I sent it to say it's wrong. While that's common, you had that happen, but it was wrong in not the way that we expect. Tell us that story about the customer that told you that your ROI calculator is wrong.
So that was an interesting one, because it was a friendly. First of all, they said, "Can you really do this in ServiceNow?" We're like, "Absolutely, we've done it for a lot of people. We can do it for you." Okay, help us build an ROI calculator. We built an ROI calculator. Like, okay, take us behind the curtain, show us your numbers. And they picked it apart, saying, "This number's low. It takes us, twice as long to do that, and this number's low, and this number's low." And we build them out based on the size of your IT budget. So if it's $100 million, you're not going to have as much ROI as if you have a $500 million budget, just because.
Some rules of thumb that scale.
Right. But yeah, we've had them pull it apart and actually make it even stronger ROI. So we don't try to come in and say, if the planet's aligned and it's not a leap year, you could maybe on a good day get this money. It's like, you're going to get this money and then some, because we want people to feel extremely comfortable that we can do this for them. We don't want them to be holding their breath that, oh boy, I hope this works or I'm getting fired. It's like, and we've actually had people who have taken our calculator and they said, "I'm cutting your numbers in half and I'm cutting them again, because if I put this in front of them, they're going to expect this from me." And it's like, do with it what you want.
Interesting.
But so he had two aces up his sleeve when he presented the ROI to his leadership.
Yep. So if I restate that, just to kind of unpack what I heard on the ROI calculator, there's one client that looked at it and was like, "No, we need to ramp this up to see significantly more ROI than what your model had put together." Then you had another customer that's like, "I can't." While it's been vetted and proven, he took that same model. And he's like, "I'm going to cut all these in half because I don't want to overpromise. I want to overdeliver."
Right.
Both of those are a good place to be.
Oh, absolutely.
The other thing that I want to call out, particularly when we have this slide still up, is we've got 5 knobs, categories, if you will, right, of spend reduction, and 5 categories of spend optimization. As organizations are watching this or considering this and start talking to us, that's really important to be able to say, here's 10 different ways your CMDB can turn into an ATM. These aren't once and done. These are reoccurring.
Right.
But over and over, the other thing I heard you say is, as we've worked with clients through this process, out of those 10, if we pick one of them, that's more than paid for the project, right?
Right. So think about that. I've said this to people and they don't believe me going in, but they believe when we're done. If you're only going to do one thing with ServiceNow over the next 12 months and you're trying to demonstrate ROI, like if anybody tells you ServiceNow is too expensive, they haven't done this project.
Right.
If they've done this project, they're like, wow, ServiceNow is cheaper than spreadsheets. You know, everybody says spreadsheets are free. Spreadsheets are really expensive to use. They're not going to do this for you.
Yeah, they're free to create, but the maintenance behind them is crazy expensive.
Right. So this is the best thing you can do with ServiceNow, especially if anybody's giving you pushback on how much it costs. You're not optimizing it. You know, it's kind of like buying a Ferrari to go get a loaf of bread. Well, you can get a loaf of bread with a lot cheaper vehicle, but if you have this Ferrari, you know, let's open that thing up and let's let it roar.
Right, right. This has been awesome, Tom. You know, I thank you for taking the time with me today. I've enjoyed working with you at Third Era, and as Third Era and Align Financials are partners. And as people are watching this, you know, obviously this is going to be on LinkedIn, you know, YouTube and Twitter. If this sparked your interest, a next step would be to reach out to either myself or Tom and just say, show me those 10 ways we could optimize. Let's find a way to turn your CMDB into an ATM. Any closing thoughts, Tom?
That would be it. I will tell you that we get a lot of naysayers, and when they reach out and they say, prove this, the meeting is usually with like 2 or 3 people, and then they'll say, can you do the same presentation a week from now? And I'm going to go get 20 people. And it's like, oh, you were the scouting party. Because even when we tell them this, they don't believe it, right? And so we come in and we do the same thing again, because you really, really can do this with ServiceNow. And if you're not doing this, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's pretty compelling, but it does take a little bit to get through. And that's why I'm not surprised where it's like, I heard you, oh, there is something there.
Yeah.
Let's get more people with their eyeballs on it. And I think that's good.
Yeah, get all the naysayers in the room, though. You're right. Let's get everybody together, because it's not us versus them. It's, guys, we're all looking for the same thing here as a company. Right. We just don't necessarily look at the world the same way. And this allows everybody, it's not to say change the way you look at it. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's all stored one way and it presents to the consumer the way they want to consume it.
Indeed. Cool. Well, again, Tom, thank you. For everyone watching Workflow Wednesday. Meet me here every week as I live stream something about what's happening now in the business world and what's happening now on ServiceNow. And reach out. Was part of Third Era. We are an elite ServiceNow provider, arguably one of them that stands out in this ecosystem that you really need to meet if you haven't already. Reach out to myself. If you want to reach out to Tom, you can reach out to him. Both of us, you can find us on LinkedIn. Again, thanks so much, and tune in next week where we'll be talking about managed services. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.